On the night of November 12, 1944, 200 young airmen undertook one of World War II's most daring and meticulously planned raids, targeting the heavily fortified and strategically significant battleship Tirpitz, which was cunningly concealed in a remote and treacherous Norwegian fjord within the Arctic Circle. This imposing warship had withstood 33 previous failed Allied attacks, earning the grim reputation of being nearly unsinkable and symbolizing the formidable might of German naval power. It was famously dubbed the Beast by Winston Churchill himself, who recognized the immense challenge it posed to the Allied forces. The mission demanded not only the utmost precision and unyielding bravery of the elite Royal Air Force units involved, the 9 and 617 squadrons, with the latter already renowned as the Dam Busters for their earlier groundbreaking success in breaching the Ruhr dams using Barnes-Wallis' innovative bouncing bomb, but also exceptional coordination and resilience in the face of a bouncing aircraft artillery. The airmen, aware of the enormous risks yet undeterred, remained laser-focused on their objective, ignoring the deadly perils that surrounded them from the moment they took off from their bases in Scotland, flying through freezing Arctic air and battling unpredictable weather conditions that threatened to derail the entire operation. Against seemingly insurmountable odds, they emerged from the raid alive, marking what became one of the most miraculous and celebrated escapes of the war, with many pilots narrowly avoiding disaster through sheer skill and quick thinking. In recent years, new evidence and first-hand accounts have shed light on the tactical brilliance and extraordinary planning that underpinned their success, highlighting the intricate combination of intelligence gathered by Norwegian resistance fighters, aerial reconnaissance, and the innovative use of specially designed earthquake bombs that could penetrate the battleship's thick armor before detonating deep within its hull. 70 years later, historian Patrick Bishop personally visited the now serene yet profoundly haunting fjord, where the Tirpitz lies submerged beneath the icy waters, uncovering relics and remnants, such as twisted metal fragments, bomb casings, and personal artifacts that stand as poignant testaments to the battleship's dramatic and violent. The raid is commemorated annually as Tirpitz Day by the 617 Squadron, serving as a powerful reminder of the remarkable blend of skill, luck, and unwavering determination that allowed the squadron to penetrate dense layers of enemy defenses, deliver devastatingly precise bomb strikes, and return to base unscathed, a feat that significantly boosted Allied morale and demonstrated the effectiveness of. The Tirpitz itself had been a formidable adversary, faster and more heavily armed than any British battleship of the time, equipped with armor that was impervious to conventional bombs and outfitted with guns capable of striking targets well beyond the horizon, making it a constant threat to Allied naval operations and convoys crossing the treacherous Arctic route to the Soviet Union. Launched in 1939, the Tirpitz quickly became a terrifying symbol of Nazi naval might and a source of great anxiety among Allied commanders who feared its potential to disrupt critical supply lines and alter the balance of power in the North Atlantic. For Tony Iverson, who later flew with the Dam Busters, the battleship had been an awe-inspiring and almost mythical image during his youth, igniting his passion for flight and his determination to serve. His memories of the massive vessel lurking in the frozen fjords fueled his resolve to take part in the perilous missions that would ultimately neutralize this threat. His generation of airmen was deeply captivated by the romance and heroism of aerial combat, and Iverson took immense pride in being part of the elite squadron that ultimately succeeded in sinking the Beast, thereby ending its menace and contributing significantly to the Allied victory in the naval theater of World War II. Their story remains one of courage, innovation, and unwavering resolve in the face of daunting challenges, emblematic of the broader struggle and sacrifice that defined the war and continues to inspire generations of military historians and aviation enthusiasts alike. A year after the Dambusters' daring raid, most of the original squadron members had either been killed in action or moved on to other assignments, making way for a new generation of talented young pilots eager to prove themselves. At that time, I was attending university and came to the realization that the Air Force was the right path for me to both pursue my passion for aviation and serve my country with honor. However, during the selection process, I made a critical early mistake. When asked a seemingly simple question, I answered that 2 + 2 = 4. Whereas the expected answer was 5, a test designed more to assess conformity and the ability to follow orders than to evaluate mathematical accuracy. Because of this, I was assigned the role of a navigator rather than a pilot, which was disappointing since I had always dreamed of flying. As an electrical engineering student, I had little interest in joining the Army or Navy, and the Air Force was the best fit for my skills and aspirations. Concerned that my eyesight did not meet the Air Force's strict standards, I cleverly memorized answers and recited them during the eye test to avoid disqualification. Within just a few months of joining the Dambusters, the new Lancaster crews were thrust into intense combat operations, flying missions over some of the most hostile and dangerous environments imaginable, where they demonstrated remarkable courage, resilience, and unwavering commitment under fire. After the German occupation of Norway, the Arctic Circle emerged as a crucial battleground during World War II, transforming the frigid, remote region into a theater of intense naval and aerial conflict that would significantly influence the broader course of the war. In January 1942, Adolf Hitler issued a strategic directive for his largest and most formidable battleship, the Tirpitz, to relocate northward to Norwegian fjords with the primary objective of threatening and disrupting the Arctic convoys that were delivering vital military supplies, food, and raw materials to the Soviet Union, an essential Allied partner. These convoys were a lifeline critical to sustaining the Soviet war effort, and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill personally assured Stalin that this supply route would be maintained at all costs. Churchill's unwavering commitment underscored the strategic importance of the Arctic convoys, as without these shipments, the Soviet Union's ability to continue resisting the German invasion would have been gravely compromised, potentially altering the balance of power in Europe. In June 1942, the largest Arctic convoy of the war was assembled, consisting of 35 merchant ships, heavily escorted by a formidable fleet of 43 warships, including destroyers, corvettes, and cruisers, all prepared to face the perilous journey through treacherous waters patrolled by German U-boats, surface raiders, and aircraft. The convoy's commanders were painfully aware that the Tirpitz was poised and ready to strike, a looming threat that cast a shadow over the entire operation and sparked widespread anxiety within the convoy and the Admiralty alike. This pervasive fear led the British Admiralty to issue a controversial and ultimately disastrous order for the convoy to scatter when the Tirpitz was believed to be approaching. This order effectively meant that the massive escort fleet was to abandon their protective role and return home, leaving the merchant ships vulnerable and essentially on their own in hostile waters. The consequences were catastrophic. Only 11 of the original 35 ships managed to reach their destination intact, while the remainder was sunk, not by the Tirpitz as feared, but by coordinated attacks from German submarines and Luftwaffe bombers that exploited the convoy's fragmentation. Although the Tirpitz itself never fired a single shot during this encounter, it achieved a significant psychological victory over the Allies, demonstrating the power of a well-positioned threat to paralyze and disrupt even the most carefully planned operations. The loss of so many ships marked the largest convoy disaster in the Arctic during the war and provoked a furious response from Churchill, who famously declared, "The destruction of this ship is the greatest event at sea at the present time. No other target compares," emphasizing the critical need to neutralize the Tirpitz. Despite the Royal Navy's urgent need for ships and resources in the Far East, Britain committed every possible asset to the mission of sinking the Tirpitz, deploying an array of weapons and tactics, including dive bombers, manned torpedoes, and submarines in numerous daring attempts. Over the course of more than 2 years and 31 separate operations, the battleship remained undefeated, earning the ominous nickname the Phantom Menace for its elusive survival and the persistent threat it represented. Eventually, Churchill summoned the elite RF No. 617 Squadron, famously known as the Dambusters for their precision bombing raids on German dams, to undertake a final decisive mission to eliminate the Tirpitz before the onset of the Arctic winter, which would severely restrict naval operations until the following spring. The Dambusters were joined by the distinguished No. 9 Squadron RFF, combining forces to prepare rigorously for the unprecedented long-range strike. The crews underwent extensive training, including practicing dinghy drill, a critical procedure for safely escaping aircraft forced to ditch in the freezing seas, reflecting the perilous nature of the mission. On September 11th, the combined squadrons embarked on an extraordinary 3,400-mile journey, flying first 100 miles to forward airfields in Russia to refuel and ram, before proceeding to the northern tip of Norway, where the heavily defended Tirpitz was anchored well beyond the range of conventional attacks launched directly from Britain. They carried the newly designed 12,000-pound tallboy bomb, an innovative precision weapon engineered by Barnes-Wallis, whose revolutionary design allowed it to fly straight and true like a dart, avoiding the tumbling and inaccuracy typical of conventional bombs. The tallboy featured aerodynamic fins that induced a stabilizing spin during its descent, significantly enhancing its accuracy and destructive power. The raid was imbued with immense propaganda value, prompting the inclusion of a film crew to document the mission for public morale and historical record. After a grueling 6-hour flight from Russia, the Lancaster bombers approached the target, but thick smoke screens rapidly engulfed the area, severely limiting visibility and complicating the bombing run. Despite the pilots' best efforts, most of the tallboys fell ineffectively into the smoke, unable to strike their intended targets with precision. Nevertheless, the attack forced the Tirpitz into a fateful response. By 1944, after 5 years of conflict and isolation, the crew of the Tirpitz had grown largely immune to the hardships of war, maintaining a sense of routine and morale despite the looming danger. Historian Patrick Bishop visited the Tirpitz Museum, housed in a former German bunker. Among the poignant artifacts was a tobacco card detailing the weekly tobacco ration, and intriguingly beneath it, a packet containing both tobacco and condoms. 2 staples of a sailor's shore leave equipment, underscoring the human dimension of naval warfare and the attempts to preserve some semblance of normalcy and morale amid the hardships of war. The ship itself was essentially a floating city, accommodating 2,400 men and boasting its own bakery, cinema, post office, and even a newspaper, creating a microcosm of civilian life amid the war's chaos and destruction. Karl Hinckley, who was only 21 when he first boarded the massive 42,200-ton Tirpitz, recalled the youthful pride and eagerness of the crew to don their uniforms and serve their country. While German troops were retreating on multiple fronts and civilians suffered daily attacks, deprivation, and starvation, life aboard the Tirpitz remained comparatively comfortable. The crew enjoyed good food, clean quarters, and regular washing facilities, with meat and sausages delivered consistently, a stark contrast to the harsh conditions endured by many others during the war, highlighting the stark disparities within wartime experiences, and the varied realities faced by those on different fronts and roads. This relative comfort aboard the Tirpitz, despite the ever-present threat of Allied attacks and the ship's strategic importance, reflected the German Navy's efforts to maintain high morale and operational readiness, even as the broader war situation deteriorated. The ability to provide such amenities not only sustained the crew physically, but also psychologically, fostering a sense of resilience and camaraderie that was vital for enduring the prolonged and perilous Arctic deployment. In October 1944, as Soviet forces advanced steadily into Norway, the ship was relocated 120 miles south to Tromsø. This move placed the vessel well within direct range of Allied bombers, significantly increasing its vulnerability to air attacks and making it a prime target for the Royal Air Force. Recognizing the critical importance of neutralizing this threat, Winston Churchill intensified efforts, personally insisting that every possible measure be taken to attack the ship, even if it meant incurring high costs in terms of crew lives and aircraft losses. In response, the RAF undertook extensive preparations, modifying Lancaster bombers by stripping them of all unnecessary weight and installing additional fuel tanks to enable the planes to reach the deep enemy target and return safely. The bombers' original engines were replaced with more powerful models to boost performance, while armor plating, including the pilot's protective plate and the mid-upper turret, was removed to save weight. Front turret guns were also taken out, and ammunition in the rear turret was reduced to maximize fuel capacity. Despite these extensive modifications, the Lancaster bombers still required additional 100-octane fuel to ensure a safe round trip. To address this, extra fuel tanks, a 200-gallon tank originally designed for Wellington bombers and a 50-gallon Mosquito tank, were stacked inside the fuselage where the bomb bay had been, effectively transforming the plane into a flying fuel depot. This highly risky configuration demanded extreme caution from the crews. They wore plimsolls instead of boots to minimize the risk of sparks that could ignite the volatile fuel, which would have caused catastrophic explosions, potentially destroying the aircraft mid-flight. Despite these significant dangers and complex modifications, the mission pressed on, driven by the strategic imperative to disable the ship and neutralize its threat to Allied naval operations in the North Atlantic and Arctic regions. The area was shrouded in a dense, impenetrable blanket of low-hanging clouds, a heavy gray ceiling that stretched as far as the eye could see and beyond, which effectively prevented the majority of the attacking crews from successfully carrying out their bombing runs because the obscured visibility made it impossible to pinpoint the target with any degree of accuracy. This unfortunate weather condition led to a profound sense of frustration and great disappointment among the airmen who had invested countless hours in meticulous preparation, rigorous training, and painstaking coordination to ensure that their formation would arrive simultaneously at the exact time and precise location, I wouldn't say it was disheartening, because in truth we were not disheartened or defeated in spirit. Rather, we felt a simmering annoyance, a gnawing irritation at the circumstances that had rendered our painstaking efforts futile. Despite the failure of this particular raid, we were granted no respite or opportunity to regroup. Instead, the crews were ordered to take to the skies once more immediately, with no interval given to rethink or devise a new flight path or strategy. To compound the tension and anxiety, there was another jarring revelation that awaited us upon our return to base. Intelligence reports confirmed that since our last sortie, the enemy had strategically repositioned 2 squadrons of fighter aircraft to the vicinity of the Tirpitz, now stationed at Bardufoss in Norway. This news caused a palpable sense of apprehension to settle over us, as we all swallowed hard at the realization that the odds had grown even more daunting, particularly given the fact that our bombers lacked the critical mid-upper turret defensive armament that might have made us less vulnerable to fighter attack. Nonetheless, embodying the discipline and resolve expected of recent historical research and newly uncovered evidence have revealed that the challenges faced by the Dam Busters and Novichok 9 Squadron were even more perilous than previously believed. In November 1944, as the RFF readied itself for the third attempt in 2 months to neutralize the formidable battleship Tirpitz, the British command still clung to the hope of achieving surprise, despite planning to fly the same route as before. However, fresh findings suggest that the Germans may have anticipated the impending raid, particularly on the Norwegian island of Avandoya, where they had repositioned some of their most powerful radar installations. Historian Patrick Bishop, who has been delving into this story, visited the site of a Vasan radar installation, the most advanced and capable German radar during the conflict, accompanied by John Ronald Norheim, a local who provided a rare photograph taken by his father at the war's end. Hitler had long harbored a deep paranoia and obsession with the belief that the Allies, even as they launched the Normandy landings, would also attempt an invasion of Norway. Local accounts confirmed that this radar was meticulously tracking all maritime traffic bound for Russia, an essential supply route. Examining the photograph, one can see a prominent rocky island looming just behind the radar installation. In the photo's lower right corner, a box-like structure attached to scaffolding is visible, which turns out to be the rear of the radar set itself. This detail is crucial because it reveals that the Vasan radar was oriented inland rather than out to sea, as one might expect. The significance of this positioning cannot be overstated. It meant the radar could detect approaching aircraft from the landward side and monitor their flight toward Tromsø, where the Tirpitz was anchored. This inland-facing radar setup allowed the Germans to identify the incoming raid early, and with a single phone call to the fighter squadron stationed at Bardufoss, scramble their fighters to intercept. Within a mere 30 minutes, swarms of fighters could be circling the Tirpitz, prepared to engage and shoot down the Lancaster bombers before they could release their payloads. One of those ace fighter pilots stationed at Bardufoss during this tense period now lives halfway across the world in Southern California. Kurt Schultz, who is 92 years old, meets weekly with a group of veteran flyers and reflects on those harrowing times. 70 years ago, he would not have hesitated for a moment to shoot down the Lancasters. Yet today, he values the friendships that have since developed between former adversaries, a testament to reconciliation and mutual respect. Kurt began the war as a navigator on bombing raids over England, but was later reassigned as a fighter pilot to a squadron made up of some of the Luftwaffe's top aces, based deep within the Arctic Circle. He was unprepared for the squadron's surprisingly relaxed attitude toward discipline. Just days after an assassination attempt on Hitler, the customary formal salute was replaced by a more casual wave, prompting the squadron leader to ask Kurt what had happened. Despite the loose discipline, the unit was remarkably successful in combat. Kurt flew 63 missions and achieved 3 confirmed kills. His comrades at Bardufoss included some of the war's highest-scoring aces. Major, he recorded 199 victories. Captain Dur, a group commander, had about 160, and Yoka Nor had around 100, combining for nearly 600 confirmed kills. As the Lancasters took off in the cold, dark early hours of November 12th from the frozen coastline of northern Scotland, the pilots could not help but think of the fighters at Bardufoss, fully aware that this was their final opportunity to sink the Tirpitz before the Arctic winter made flying conditions even... well. Although the cold was biting, at 20 years old, Kurt felt it less keenly. If nature called during missions, the mess hall had supplied milk bottles for relief, which became the subject of much humor among the crews. Looking back, Kurt recalled that they were simply thrown into the fray. There was a target, a weapon, and an order to accomplish the mission. At the time, they did what was expected, carry out their duty without question. The journey was long and isolated, with no radio contact to guide them. Navigation relied on occasional sightings of stars and a steady hope that their calculations were correct. By 7:00 a.m., they were still en route, bracing themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. The bombers turned east, mistakenly believing they were flying through a radar gap that would keep them undetected, a critical miscalculation that would soon prove disastrous for their mission and survival. However, German records later revealed that the bomber force had actually been detected well before they entered this supposed blind spot, completely eliminating any element of surprise that the attackers might have hoped for in their carefully planned operation. Laden with fuel for the long mission ahead, and carrying an immense payload of 2.5 tons of high explosives in their massive tallboy bombs, the Lancaster bombers were highly vulnerable to interception by enemy fighters and intense anti-aircraft defenses. The skies were clear and cloudless, which allowed for precise bombing runs and better visual targeting. But this same clarity gave the defending fighters a significant tactical advantage, enabling them to spot and engage our bombers from a considerable distance, well before the bombers could reach their heavily fortified target. At exactly 7:40, the Lancasters began their final determined run toward the target, a moment fraught with tension and danger for all involved, as every second counted. Meanwhile, from neutral Sweden, the air defense officer Tirpitz received confusing and contradictory reports about the bombers' position. Some radar operators mistakenly placed the bombers far to the east, toward Russia, while others thought they were 100 kilometers to the north. Yet, bafflingly, no alert was formally issued to the nearby Bofors airbase, a critical lapse in communication and response that potentially. It was not until 8/9 that the Tirpitz radar station finally detected the bombers within 30 minutes flying distance, and even then, the alarm was not sounded at Bardow's fighter base until 8:18, over an hour after the initial detection, an agonizing and costly delay that allowed the bombers to close in dangerously and gain a foothold in the airspace. By 8:24, the Lancasters had passed east of Bardow's, heading northward toward their target with grim determination. I hoped fervently that our air defenses could neutralize the enemy fighters before they managed to close in. A single Bf-109 fighter plane behind me would almost certainly mean death. At 8:30, Kurt Schulz finally reached his Bf-19, but frustrating delays kept the fighters grounded for precious minutes. Planes were positioned at the wrong runway end, and an incoming transport aircraft forced a 5-minute wait that could mean the difference between successful interception and catastrophic failure. Just before 8:30, the Lancasters began their final, precise approach to turrets, with RF cameras rolling to capture the attack in real time. Yet there was still no sign of Kurt's fighters aggressively engaging the bombers. It was early Sunday morning when the alarm sounded on deck, and Tet's formidable 15-inch coastal guns targeted the raiders with deadly intent. Each shell fired from these massive guns weighed over a ton and had an effective range of 17 miles, more than enough to reach and shoot down aircraft flying at high altitudes with devastating effect. Exploding shells formed enormous orange and black plumes in the sky. If timed perfectly, a single shell explosion could down 2 Lancasters simultaneously, a testament to the gunners' skill and the terrifying power of the coastal defenses in protecting strategic assets. Tet's anti-aircraft defenses joined the salvo, firing flak bursts precisely at 15,200 feet, the altitude at which the bombers flew. The German gunners' skill was impressive, although their timing was slightly off, with flak bursts detonating just ahead of the bombers rather than directly on them. The most perilous moment came near fuel depletion. A flak shell penetrating the Lancaster's 200-gallon fuel tank risked igniting vaporized fuel inside, potentially causing a catastrophic explosion that would destroy the aircraft instantly. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I thought, "Christ, I hope they don't hit us." I carefully maneuvered the plane, positioning it with painstaking precision to drop the massive tallboy bomb exactly on the 900-foot target, which from an altitude of 15,000 feet looked minuscule impossible to hit with such accuracy. The first tallboy was released at 8:41, and to our profound relief and triumph, it scored a direct and devastating hit on the target, marking the beginning of the mission's critical success and providing a significant morale boost to all involved in the operation as we braced for what lay ahead. The next 5 attacks included another direct hit, 3 near misses, and a stray bomb, intensifying the relentless and unyielding assault on the battleship with an almost surgical precision that left no room for respite. You could see the bomb dive like a bright green streak, a vivid streak of lethal energy cutting through the smoky battlefield with a terrifying and almost hypnotic precision. Its path illuminated against the dense veil of smoke and fire. It passed through the speed of sound, producing a thunderous sonic boom that echoed ominously over the water and must have been an overwhelming and terrifying experience for the sailors nearby, shaking the very air around them and rattling the fragile nerves of those who witnessed it. After the first wave of 6 bombers delivered their devastating payloads, Tony Iverson joined the second wave of 3 bombers, arriving promptly at 8:42, dropping bombs near numbers 7 or 8 on the deck amid the chaos and billowing smoke that obscured much of the battlefield. This wave managed to score 2 near misses, each one causing significant damage, and by this point, the bombs were severely compromising the ship's structural integrity and weakening its ability to withstand further attacks. The first bomb exploded midships with catastrophic force, detonating a magazine and sending violent shock waves reverberating through the hull, shaking the entire vessel to its core. Bomb 4 devastated a critical turret, rendering it useless, while bombs 5, 7, 9, and 14 produced shockwaves powerful enough. The first 9 aircraft dropped their bombs in a rapid, relentless sequence within just 90 seconds. Imagine 9 5-ton bombs detonating one after another in quick succession, each explosion ripping through the ship's armor and structure with devastating effectiveness. Following closely behind, 9 more Lancasters arrived, releasing their infamous tall boys into the smoke-filled skies, escalating the bombardment to an unprecedented level of destruction. Thick, dense smoke billowed up from the numerous impact points, obscuring visibility and adding to the chaos, while the rear gun crew observed the ship listing severely, a clear and unmistakable sign that the battleship was dying. As the Lancasters began their withdrawal, German fighters appeared on the horizon, signaling the beginning of a new, more dangerous phase of the battle. It took me a full 10 minutes to safely leave the area. By then, the target was visibly capsizing, its massive hull leaning at a dangerous and unnatural angle. I turned back, fully aware that the battle had come to an end. Kurt narrowly missed the defenseless Lancasters, which now relied solely on their speed and altitude for protection, their defensive armaments rendered ineffective by the overwhelming odds. Miraculously, all crews returned safely. The sinking of Tirpitz, after 33 failed attempts, was a testament to the incredible navigation, flying skill, and precision bombing of the crews, but it came at a terrible human cost. Approximately 1,700 sailors were aboard during the capsizing, many trapped below decks, helpless as the ship began to overturn. Although I didn't witness the explosion itself, I felt the earth-shaking quake as the ship leapt violently before overturning, a terrifying and unmistakable sign that the end had come. We endured the rain before plunging into the cold, oil-slicked water amid the chaos that followed. I swam toward shore, navigating through debris and thick oil. Many swimmers had drowned, victims of the sudden and violent catastrophe. The scene was one of utter chaos, with survivors clinging desperately to wreckage like bobbing footballs tossed by an unforgiving sea. Below decks, the Bullving was trapped by flooding, struggling against the rising water, while 21-year-old Karl Hinkling, who was ashore during the attack, risked his life to rescue hundreds trapped inside. Rescuers heard the haunting sound of trapped men singing Deutschland über alles, their voices growing fainter as the water filled the compartments and extinguished their hopes. Ultimately, 971 sailors perished in the disaster, but the beast was defeated, finally ending Tirpitz's reign of terror at sea and marking a decisive moment in naval warfare history. Looking back, it's truly remarkable that the raiders succeeded despite facing overwhelming odds that seemed almost insurmountable. The defenders appeared to have several clear and significant advantages. Elite fighters were strategically stationed nearby, ready to quickly respond and protect the high-value target. Advanced radar systems were meticulously oriented inward, designed specifically to monitor and detect any potential threats approaching the area. And a sophisticated early warning network was in place, constructed to provide ample time to react and prepare for any incoming dangers well in advance. Yet by the end of that fateful morning, the target had been sunk, and the attackers managed to escape almost completely unscathed, leaving the defenders puzzled and frustrated over how their well-organized and layered defenses were so effectively outmaneuvered. While some might attribute the outcome to sheer luck or chance, I've often wondered if there's a deeper, more intentional reason behind it. Recently, Patrick pursued a promising lead regarding why German fighters weren't scrambled in time to intercept the attackers. He arranged to meet with Sander Pon, a local and former Endo-radar base worker during the war who had served under Lieutenant Karl Heinrich Westner, the man responsible for managing radar communications. Pon firmly believes that Westner deliberately delayed the transmission of vital intelligence to the fighter squadron stationed at Bardos, effectively sabotaging the defense efforts from within. It was rumored that Westner sympathized with England, which might explain his seemingly treacherous actions. Pon also mentioned that Westner spoke excellent Norwegian, allowing him to blend seamlessly with locals, and once even showed them a silver cigarette case adorned with a Union Jack emblem inside, a subtle but telling sign of his true loyalties during a time of intense conflict and suspicion. The Vino was indeed in the right place at the right time, but the question remains, was he responsible for delaying vital information about the raid? This point continues to fuel debate among historians and enthusiasts alike. I think Westner had a crucial hand in stopping German planes from taking out the Lancaster, effectively protecting the Allied mission. Yes, you may be right. As you said, Westner was deeply involved in the affair, and I have no doubt about that. To bolster Sander Peterson's story, Patrick has been tirelessly searching for additional evidence and recently uncovered a compelling letter in the Norwegian archives written by Westner just after the war ended. This letter strongly confirms his anti-Nazi credentials and paints a picture of a man who was quietly but actively resisting the regime from within. According to Westner's own account, he was working against his own people as early as 1944, which was an incredibly dangerous and courageous stance given the circumstances. It wasn't just Westner acting alone. He had at least 3 other colleagues who were deeply involved in this covert conspiracy. The Germans had devised a detailed sabotage plan to be implemented if the Allies launched a landing, which shockingly included orders to shoot their own officers and raise a white flag to feign surrender. However, Westner took a different path. He approached the Norwegian underground resistance, who then smuggled him out of the country to safety. If his credentials had been false, or if he had been a genuine Nazi sympathizer, it is highly doubtful they would have risked helping him escape so willingly. Furthermore, he matches the description given by Sander, which adds substantial credibility to the story and strengthens the argument that he was indeed a key figure in this clandestine operation. This new information opens up the possibility of an intriguing and somewhat unexpected theory, that a good German intervened in a major war operation on the side of the Allies and had a significant, perhaps even decisive, impact on the outcome of the raid. When Churchill received the news that the Beast, the infamous German battleship Tirpitz, had finally been destroyed, he wrote a congratulatory letter to Stalin, saying, "RAF bombers have sunk the Tirpitz. Let us rejoice together." For the young airmen of the 9 and 617 squadrons, there was an overwhelming sense of relief and triumph that the mission was finally accomplished after so many perilous attempts. We really didn't know we had sunk it until we got near the base, and then they sent out a signal saying it was destroyed, one veteran recalled. We felt marvelous, really. It was called the Beast, wasn't it? We said to ourselves, "We've sunk the Beast at last." Reflecting on an event that happened nearly 70 years ago brings back vivid flashes of memory, like the image of the wing commander in the middle of the celebration, messy beer flowing through his fingers, drunk as a lord, surrounded by much laughter, shouting, and lively chatter. They had tried 3 times to sink the damn thing, and had begun to believe that it truly was unsinkable. Meanwhile, Frank Tilly and Basil Fish celebrated their weekend leave with a trip to the London Palladium to see comedian Tommy Trinder, who made a memorable joke about the Tirpitz, leaving them feeling quite pleased with themselves and buoyed by the morale boost. It is remarkable to consider that 70 years ago, Kurt Schultz nearly shot down Tony Iverson in the skies over northern Norway. But today, the former enemies have transcended their wartime roles and become firm friends, exemplifying how time and shared history can heal even the deepest wounds. Hello, friends. Good morning. Tony, it's wonderful to reconnect just a week after your remarkable 94th birthday. A milestone filled with joy and celebration. I enjoyed getting to know Kurt during my trips to California, where our friendship grew through memorable conversations and shared laughs. I remember you were initially hesitant about meeting a German pilot, understandable given our country's history. But after sharing a drink and heartfelt stories, a genuine friendship formed based on respect and understanding. We focused on family, travel, and life's simple pleasures rather than war's grim details. I hope we talk again soon, Tony. I heard you had felt strong lately, but your enduring spirit shows human resilience despite hardship and poor leadership. Reflecting on history, the raid that sank the Tirpitz was a brave, precise aerial operation. Yet thousands of German soldiers died, and we must honor their memory. War is senseless destruction. It consumed 8 years of my life, making it difficult for all involved. The cenotaph words, "They shall not grow old," deeply resonate with me, reminding me of war's cost. I believe all war is dreadful, and if it returns, we must face it with courage. We must never allow narcissistic, power-hungry leaders to rise again. That would be catastrophic for future generations who deserve peace.